Boom. All right, ladies and gentlemen, hackers can own your entire network in seconds. And today we're going to talk about how we're going to stop them. Let's get this one started. Here we go.
Shut up and sit down.
Look, a business can give you everything you want in life. Prestige, wealth, freedom. It can also take everything away from you. This show is for those who are willing to take that risk. These are the real life stories of entrepreneurs. But before we start, I have one small favor to ask. Please leave a comment. It can be advice, critiques, tips, feedback, or share this with someone because your engagement is the most valuable and most powerful form of social currency. So thank you, and welcome to another episode of Business Bros.
All right, business bros. He's a top tier ethical hacker turned cyber bodyguard for defense contractors, doctors, and businesses that don't even realize they're vulnerable. He's written books, battled ransomware, and saved companies from total digital wipeout. So please welcome to the show, Mr. Craig Petronella. All right, Craig, we're living in the cybersecurity, AI living world. Welcome to the program, man. Tell me a little bit about your background.
Thank you. Well, I've been doing this for over 2 decades now. So I started back in 2002, and my company is Cybersecurity Compliance, and we leverage AI to help automate and defend against the bad guys.
One of my very first companies I've ever had, a business we built out of necessity. We were repairing computers back in the Windows 98, Windows XP era. And I remember back then, the solution was almost always the same. It was going to be a format reinstall, save your pictures, save your stuff. And that was kind of the solution for the problem. Today, the world is so much more different. How have things changed from when you started 2 decades ago to where you're at today?
Exponentially. I mean, sometimes the format reinstall is an option. We try to do that as a last effort because it's just so intrusive. I mean, to recover, I don't know about you, when the last time you got a computer was, but we just have so much stuff on them now, right? Even your phones, your devices that you use every day. I mean, so many applications, so much custom configuration to you. And if you're not backing that stuff up the right way, and you got to recreate everything, it's hours or often days of time to get all that going again. So as far as today, it's just so complicated now, especially with AI and the power of hackers using it for bad. It's just very, very complicated.
There's so many ways that hackers can gain access into some of the stuff that our companies might be using. One of the most recent ones that pops into my mind is when the MGM had some hacker come in recently, and like the whole network had to be shut down. Imagine casinos losing how much money they would lose shutting everything down like that. Imagine being at the casino trying to check out, and there's a huge line to check out because everything's got to be done manually. What are some of the more surprising, creative ways you've seen hackers gain access to a company's network?
So the most recent investigation that we were hired, the victims were like, hey, we were using multi-factor authentication. We have a bank. We have a special hardware token that we use. How did these guys get in? And what we found out was the hackers got in by stealing what's called the encrypted cookie. So when the person successfully used the MFA method with the hardware key, they did all the things the right way. But what they did wrong was they allowed the box to be checked. I'm sure you've seen it where it says, remember this device for 30 days. And what happens when you check that box is it drops an encrypted cookie to your device, and it won't ask you for MFA next time you log in. So the hackers know this. So they try to steal that cookie from you. And that's how they get around your MFA.
Dude, there's so many different ways. What are some of the ways that an employee or even just a regular Joe, what are things that they should look at when they get text messages, when they get emails? What are some of those things that we should kind of worry about, or maybe, a red flag should pop up when we see these types of things so we can protect our network and our own privacy?
So it's gotten so bad, excuse me, it's gotten so bad now that I actually recommend not answering your phone and not opening text messages unless you know the person, because there's actually malware that just if you get the text message, you're infected. Now, it's unlikely that you'll get that level of malware unless you're a journalist or somebody that's pretty high profile. However, it does exist. I'm sure you've heard of Pegasus. And there's derivatives of NSO that nation states are paying big bucks to have. Now, I'm not saying that you or I will get that, but as a best practice, I don't answer phone calls. I don't answer any emails, no links, no clicking of anything or any kind, not even pop-ups. You remember those banner pop-ups on your computer that says, hey, you should update? Don't click the pop-up. Just go to the website and update, or update manually, just like you would normally do it. Don't do any shortcuts. And if you're an Apple fan or use Apple iOS devices, in my opinion, Apple's done a pretty good job with security. They have what's called security key support now, where you can get like a YubiKey or a USB key. Google has now their Titan product, which is pretty cool. Again, security key. So it's all about the layers of your defense. And the more layers you have, the better you are. And never trust one layer. You should follow what's called a zero trust model. So it's actually gotten so bad when security, where you might have a camera system at your house, but don't trust one vendor of camera, maybe get 2 or 3. And the reason why, and that might seem overkill to some people, but the reason why is because these hackers are so good. They're so good at getting the big guys. Like, I don't know if you used a reference to MGM's hack, but do you remember the airline hack that happened where all the terminals were blue screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened there? It was CrowdStrike. And not to point the finger at CrowdStrike, but what I talk to people about in companies is you can't trust one vendor to do all your security either. You have to have redundancy and checks and balances. You got to be doing the risk assessments. You got to be doing what's called tabletop exercises, penetration testing. And you have to do simulations where, well, what if this company got hacked? What do we do? What's our playbook? Do we have a documented process for that? And most companies don't, and most people don't. From an identity theft perspective, most people have no idea. What's kind of crazy is I actually recommend going back to cash more than using credit cards nowadays. And that sounds so weird, right? I mean, most people, they use credit or tap to pay for everything, right? Now, tap to pay is more secure than swiping your credit card because credit cards can be skimmed, right, at the gas station, things like that. But every time you pay with some electronic device, you're giving away so much of your personal information without you even realizing it. You're giving away your identity, your name, your profile, your IP address, what device you use to pay. Whereas if you hand somebody cash, they don't even know who you are.
No, you're 100% correct. And it's crazy because the digital world's going the opposite direction, right? We're actually in real life moving away from cash and moving more towards a cashless society.
Absolutely.
We're moving into things like crypto technologies. But there's also the security features that I think are getting better. I know, for example, on my iPhone, every time I want to open an app, it scans my face. Like, it's verifying who I am. How about some of those features? I know you mentioned iOS earlier, but some of those features where it's capturing your visual identity to verify who you are. How safe are those?
So that's a great question. So security is always a balance, right? So we have, so you've got, extreme security that is hell for your everyday life and workflow. And then you have no security. So most people tail on the end of no security, or they use the same password for everything and whatnot. But again, going back to the layers. So Apple has the Face ID. They came out with the fingerprint a long time ago. Those are biometrics, and those could be added layers to the other things. So for your everyday life, yeah, you can use the biometrics. But the caveat is you don't really know where your biometrics are going. Like Apple says, oh, it's only on your device. But do they really only have, like, who's proving that? Like, have you seen it? I haven't seen a third-party report of a security company saying, you know what I mean? Like we just kind of blindly trust that, okay. But here's the other reality and the other side of that coin. All of our stuff, your stuff, my stuff, our social security numbers, our faces, our driver's license, all this stuff's been hacked. It's already on the dark web. So they've already got my face. They've already got my social security number. They got my birthday. They know my medical records, because every company is just so bad at security. I'm not saying every company, but most companies are just really bad, especially the big targets that you would think that would do more to protect us, right?
Yeah.
We're just losing the battle. And it's because there's not enough money put into the right places with security. kind of think military, right? Like military soldiers train, they have boot camp, and then they are constantly training to hone their skills, right? Or martial arts is another good example. You don't get really good at a punch or a kick by doing it one time. You might do that punch or kick to get a black belt 50,000 times. But the difference between the unskilled and the skilled could be lethal, right? So it's kind of the same thing in our world. Like if you don't do the practice tabletops and you don't do the risk assessments and the penetration tests and all this stuff, then how do you know how good of a security posture you are? And then how do you know what your vulnerabilities are? Because there's always something that on your systems, on my systems, there's always something that could be improved. Nobody's perfect. You've got the technical side and then you've got the people side. And if you're a company, what makes it more difficult is any one of your employees could do something wrong. So it's like a ticking time bomb, right? So if you don't have all of your employees trained really well, then one wrong click and you could be ransomware or whatever could go wrong, right? So then what happened? Like, have you done a simulation to see, well, okay, Susie Brown in the corner clicked on a phishing link. Now ransomware dropped. What happened next? Most people have no idea. So if you have the right layers in place, then there could be what's called containment, and it could be isolated. So all different types of drills.
I agree with you that if you don't have the security in place, you don't have the training in place, it's not going to go very far, because I can guarantee you if your company's not trying to get better, the hackers definitely are. And things are improving every single day when it comes to technology. You can bet your butt that those hackers are improving every single day trying to get inside this stuff. But it sounds like no matter what we do, there's always going to be somebody who left the front door open as they walked out the building, right? And they're going to have that vulnerability that lets somebody in. So you kind of talked a little bit about contingency plans, doing things like penetration testing. What does a penetration test even look like, and what kind of contingencies should a company be planning for? Let's assume, because the way technology is changing, that they are going to get somebody hacking their stuff.
Yeah, so most people have been hacked already and may not even know it. Most businesses have been hacked already and may not even know it. So what is a penetration test? A penetration test is a combination of using software tools. Nowadays, most companies, including ourselves, we use AI-powered tools and multiple tools. We don't trust one vendor to do our scanning. So we'll do what's called a scan or a vulnerability assessment and analysis. We'll see what the software shows. And we'll do that process with multiple vendors to see, kind of like antivirus on your computer. Never trust one antivirus vendor either. Run like 3 different companies and see if you get something, because ironically or strangely, 2 of them may be clean and then one of them shows you're infected. So same thing with a pen test. We scan everything on your network. You may have, simple Windows devices, or maybe a mix of Mac and Windows and Linux or whatever. So do like a baseline scan, figure out what your vulnerabilities are. And where the pen test side comes in is the human side. So now our ethical hacking team will look at those. We call it a stoplight report. So red, yellow, and green. Most people don't get green. So it's mostly red and yellow.
Yeah,
so
your company sticks in the red and yellow thing.
so in our world, our team, our ethical hackers will look at the reds first, right? Those are the hot areas. So, hey, look, these are big problems. And then we'll try to exploit them. We'll see what the scanner or what the software found. Hey, this computer's got, it's unpatched. It's from, 3 years out of date or whatever. Here's a CVE that'll give us remote control. So we'll actually try to exploit that vulnerability and try to see if we can prove it, right? And get in. So that's where the ethical hacking and the labor of a pen test comes in. And it comes in various shapes and sizes. Some companies are what I call check the box companies. Hey, we're a bank and we just have to check the box and say we did a pen test this year. Not really a great idea to do that, because you're not really giving a security team full reign to figure out, well, how could they get in or whatever. You're just really quickly scanning and say, yeah, we did that. But then there's liability issues with that too. If you cheap out too badly and you do a really crappy pen test, and then you find out you get hacked 6 months later, and then you go back to your pen test vendor and you're like, hey, we got a pen test from you. but we only paid $3,000 for it or whatever. And then the vendor comes back as if they were smart and they had good contract language, and they were like, well, you only paid us $3,000, so we only spent like 3 minutes on each endpoint. So, you know, we did what we were supposed to do. So then there's like the battle of litigation and things like that. But anyway, the most companies, especially small businesses, medium businesses, they have not done a real pen test. So they just really don't know what their gaps and vulnerabilities are and how bad a hacker can see them through their lens. And to your point earlier, nation states, you know, adversaries, they've got like universities that are training cyber pen testers that do this stuff 24/7. Like they have like incubation labs. So they are like so good at what they do, which is why it's so difficult of a landscape right now.
Let me hover over the small business aspect of it, because let's face it, the truth is everyone wants to be 100% secure in their business. They don't want anybody to hack them. They don't want any of their client data to be stolen. They don't want that at all. However, being a small business, there's only so much of a budget to go around. So if you had to help a small business kind of prioritize what to do first so that they can, you know, make sure they're in compliance, make sure that they got some regulations in place, some security in place, how would you kind of advise one of these small businesses first getting started to go about it correctly and not kind of blow that budget?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So it goes across, so we talked about people, process, and technology. And with businesses, you can have policies and procedures, which are the written SOPs on, you know, this is how we do things. This is our password policy. Here's how we've kind of, here's the law of the land for my company, right? This is how you do things. And then you've got what's called security controls. And quite frankly, a lot of these companies, if you're a Google company, a Microsoft company, an Apple company, that you use these devices in your small business, they actually have pretty good security control layers. Where most small businesses fail, is they don't even know what security options they have for themselves, and they don't know how to configure them properly. So most people get hacked with what's called business email compromise because they signed up for Microsoft 365, and then they had their IT team set them up, but their IT team's not a security team. So IT and cybersecurity people, especially in small business, they think that's the same company or the same person, and it's actually different. It's kind of like the general practitioner and the brain surgeon. So they're just different roles, and you can't do both roles really well. So that's why you have to have the checks and balance. And a lot of new regulations actually prohibit that you can't have the same company or same team do both sides of the equation. So going back to the small business, if you're an Apple shop, you're 10 people, you got a bunch of iPhones, take advantage of all the security that Apple offers. Use the security keys, set them up the right way. Add all of the layers that, I mean, most of the stuff is even free. You don't even have to pay extra for it. There's one cool thing in Apple's ecosystem called, in the iCloud Plus system, I don't know if you're aware, but they have a feature called Hide My Email. You aware of that?
No.
So Hide My Email is pretty cool. So, you know, a lot of, I guess, decades ago, everybody would use their single email for everything. That's actually the worst thing you could do nowadays. So you never want to, you know, going back to the cash payment system, you really don't want to give your primary work email out to everyone. There's really no reason for it. So if you're doing a transaction, if you have iCloud Plus in Apple's ecosystem, you could actually generate a random email address that'll be an alias. So you don't have to give them your real email. So then what you do is you generate these different addresses for these different websites, and you keep track of it all in what's called a password manager. And like I said, you're being stingy with who you're giving this information to. So going back to that's just an example of a security layer, but going back to a small business, you know, taking advantage of the security layers that are in the ecosystem that you're using. Microsoft has a lot of different layers. They keep adding things to it, but then, you know, having a professional configure them and set them up properly, and then doing an audit on a regular basis to make sure no controls get unwound. Those are some great recommendations.
Those are great. And at the end of the day, I've seen that you've said things like cybersecurity isn't a tech problem. It's a people and process problem. And that kind of really explains it right there, because as a business owner, oftentimes you don't have the same lexicon, the same vocabulary for each of the individual departments that need to be implemented into your business. And that was a great case in point, that just because a guy knows how to set up email and he's IT doesn't mean necessarily that he's security IT type individual. And you need to make sure that you have those professionals. And at the end of the day, it's the vulnerability of you don't know what you don't know when it comes to cybersecurity, and that's why you're talking about people and process as the problem too, right?
Yeah, because I mean, quite frankly, the human element is the weakest element, right? Like if we're not trained well and we don't know what we're doing, or if you look at the other side of that spectrum, we're trained really well. If you're really trained well, you don't even have to use antivirus. You could completely, if you're trained well, not get infected. But people have these things called antivirus, which is a security control, because if we accidentally do something wrong, right? Okay, that's a layer that may protect me. And sadly, nowadays, that antivirus is only like 5% or less effective. So it's a very poor layer nowadays, which is, again, to my point, you have to have multiple layers to protect you or your team. But you can have a small business and maybe you don't have the money to do all this stuff because everything costs money, right? So, I mean, all these layers, cameras, security, network security, XDR, rattle off all these, everything costs money. So if you're a small business and you're on a tight budget, put your money in the education. There's education, use what you have, what you've been given, and do it properly. Hire a professional to check it. So you can do a lot of it yourself and then just hire a professional to check it. That's the key underscore, because then the professional will go in and say, all right, well, yeah, you did all this stuff really great, but maybe you completely missed this area. You know what I mean? Like, so try to capture the gap before the hackers do.
Let me ask you about the talent gap. Speaking of gaps, I know there's a lot of industries out there that are suffering from shortages, especially in the blue collar area. Some of the trades jobs are really looking for people to come in and do this type of work. And I know there's a lot of kids that are going to school and getting computer science degrees, but like we talked about earlier, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're specializing in cybersecurity. Do you think there's a talent shortage for cybersecurity and that the market should be increasing for that sort of job, or where do you see the market as far as a career is concerned in your space?
So in my opinion, I do think that there's a very big shortage in cybersecurity, AI technology of all different kinds of roles. I think, again, in my opinion, colleges and universities may do a good job with teaching very broad stroke, in my opinion, not deep enough, not real world enough, too theory based, which is also why we actually created our own kind of university to help students. But the traditional tracks, I caution people in getting sucked into, hey, I need to get this certification for XYZ so I can get a job in cyber. My opinion and my recommendation is what you really need to do is, first of all, figure out what you like to do. Second of all, go deep down that rabbit hole. There's so much information on YouTube and ChatGPT and different LLMs that you can really learn a lot, but you need to roll up your sleeves and you need to go and go deep down that rabbit hole and set up a lab environment at your house, your apartment, wherever you are, whether it's virtual, whatever. You don't need to buy the latest and greatest. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars on equipment or whatever. You can do this stuff on a budget, but you need to do the work and you need to be ambitious and roll your sleeves up and be disciplined enough to troubleshoot on your own, figure stuff out, and you need to pick something and go super deep in it. So if you want to be the guy that wants to hack gas stations and mess up the signs, then go deep into the Flipper Zero. If you want to be the guy that, I don't advise doing this, but if you want to be RF jamming airplanes or something, that'll put you in prison real quick. But if you want to be that guy, then you need to learn the Hack RF1. If you want to be the guy that hacks into Microsoft, then study Microsoft really well and learn Entra and Intune and all the things that Microsoft has to offer. It doesn't have to be this $5,000, $10,000, $50,000, $100,000 degree. Oftentimes we'll get people that have a master's degree in cyber and we can't even use them because they don't have any skills that we need. So we got to train them all over again. Experience
goes a long way. That education goes. I mean, let's face it. Your company, you've been at this for quite some time. There's a reason why you have years under your belt. It's because you have the experience, not just the education. The education's important, but that experience goes a long way. Now, you have a particular client that you're looking for. Who's that ideal client that you look to work with?
So It changes. So regulated businesses that are subject to some type of mandate, like for defense, it's Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or CMMC. That's the hot topic for the defense industrial base. It's a new bar or new level that they have to adhere to. It takes NIST 800-171 and brings up the bar a bit. So that's for that defense industrial base. We also help healthcare companies with HIPAA compliance. You've probably gone to the doctor, signed your life away for HIPAA forms, and you get to see the doctor. Well, the doctor has to keep your medical records safe and secure. And sadly, if it's a hospital or a doctor or maybe an IT company that works with the doctor, which is called a business associate, all those people or parties have to keep your information secure, and that's HIPAA compliance. So typically a regulated business is an ideal client for us. However, we've been recently, since we're licensed digital forensic investigator, we've been getting a lot of people that are subject to identity theft, and they don't know where to turn. So we have solutions for identity theft now to help. People are getting their houses stolen right under their noses. They're getting crazy stuff happening to their digital world. They're getting locked out of their devices because they didn't follow protocol on Apple iCloud and properly secure it themselves. So the hacker got there first and locked them out of all their stuff. People get siphoned money out of their bank accounts. So we've got solutions for different types of people, different types of companies. Companies is who we've worked with and really been positioned to help over the past 2 decades. But recently, there's been so much identity theft. I've written books and done different training courses I have available now to really help the little guy too.
So if people go to your website, Craig, if they want to find out more of your about what you do and how you can help them, where can they go and what are they gonna find when they get there?
So they can go to PetronellaTech.com, or they could also go to our community at school.com/Petronella, which is SKOOL.com/Petronella. That's where all of our training courses, continuing education, everything's there for especially identity theft victims if they want to try to help themselves, or same for small businesses. If you're on a budget, you need to do something for HIPAA compliance, or we've got training for you there too. But if you want professional services, Petronella Tech is where you should go.
Get yourself protected, ladies and gentlemen. At the end of the day, you don't really care about it until there's an issue. And when there's an issue, it could be a very big issue that you could have had prevented had you gone to a website like how do you say your last name again? I don't want to butcher it.
It's Petronella.
Petronella. I'll spell it because that one I can do for sure. Petronella Tech TECH.com. Make sure you guys pop on over, get advice from the professionals who have already been doing this for a number of years. They've been through a number of iterations of different security protocols and things that have changed over time. You want to make sure you go with somebody who's experienced, who can advise you, just like we talked about earlier, if you're at the very beginning of your business, all the way up until you need to worry about your HIPAA compliance. So make sure you guys go to Craig's website, PetronellaTech.com. And before we head out, Craig, give me one of those real world stories, somewhere where your team came in, you were Captain America style, saved the day, and made sure that business didn't get wiped out.
Yeah, so we had a company come to us and they were hacked, not once, but twice. They called us the second time they got hacked. And they're like, hey, figure this out. So they paid us for a security risk assessment. We went through everything with a fine-tooth comb, and we traced it down to the firmware on their firewall. So I don't know if you saw in the news, but again, don't want to call out certain vendor, but this particular vendor had an issue where hackers were getting through the firewall and dropping ransomware. And that's exactly what happened to them. They lost, I think it was almost $100,000 or something like that. And we advised them after the risk assessment, hey, get rid of that brand maker model firewall, use something else. Doesn't have to be what we said to use, but just choose something else. Well, they didn't listen, and then they got hacked again. So some people, sadly, they don't want to take. They'll pay the doctor for the advice, but then they don't want to take the prescription.
I totally get that one, man. I totally get that one. You want a 6-pack, but that tub of ice cream just looks so good. Sometimes you just got to go the other way. I get it, dude. I get it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Craig, thank you very much for being on the program today. PetronellaTech.com. Make sure you guys check it out. Your cybersecurity is absolutely vitally important to your client. It should be to you as well. Make sure you guys check it out. PetronellaTech.com. Craig, thank you very much for being on the program. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace. And we're out.
Thank you so much.
It's over. Go home. Is your business in need of marketing? Try starting a podcast. But not just any podcast. Podcast like a pro. We can show you how to take your business from being invisible to becoming a brand people trust. Go to www.businessbros.biz to get started today. Business